We last left Bart Simpson battling deadly space mutants in Acclaim's best-selling video game Bart versus the Space Mutants. And now it's Bart versus the world!
Presumably you've heard about this cartoon show called The Simpsons. After its full proper TV debut in 1989, it blew up massive in the 90s. Those of us who look back on the show fondly now mostly think of it as a really funny and really insightful satire that was biting and it was bold and it was willing to put every little detail and every foible of society, American society specifically, in its crosshairs. But that was mostly confined to the seasons where Homer became the main character, and it was aimed at a general audience from around season 3 to, depending on who you talk to, around 9 or 13. So up to about the early 2000s. But in its first couple of seasons it largely appealed to kids, with Bart being perceived as the main character and the figurehead of a craze. Do you remember crazes? There were crazes all the time. It's like now when some paid Russian influencer drinks out of an overpriced cup and then young people here in the West can't steal them fast enough. That's what a craze is. Used to have them all the time. Bart Simpson was everywhere, so Bart Simpson merchandise was everywhere. And naturally there were a spate of video games trying to cash in on the whole thing.
Look for a winning Simpsons video game for every system.
Don't forget Krusty's Funhouse.
But realistically, most were terrible, some were bad, only one was ever any good, and it's the one you couldn't play at home. The arcade game came out right around the beginning of Season 2, so it was well timed to cash in, and there was often a queue of people waiting to get on when I was trying to play this thing in the arcades. Much as the Turtles arcade game had done, also made by Konami of course, this one makes use of the co-op gameplay to use every member of the family, so depending on where you put your coins in the machine, as there were different places to stand for who you wanted to play as, you could play as Bart, Homer, Marge or Lisa, and if you had 3 friends, which I did not, you could all play together. There were unique team-up moves as well that encouraged this, which was a cool idea at the time, but overall it was just another side-scrolling beat-em-up. The reason it stands out in the cultural consciousness of people my age is because of the fidelity to the TV show. Konami worked the same magic here as they had with the Turtles game. They understood that the selling point of these adaptations was authenticity and fidelity to the original source. It just looked so much like you were playing an episode, it was difficult not to be impressed, particularly compared to the home Simpsons games coming out at the time, which were all pretty rough looking. The game uses big, colourful sprites, which were a bit cleaner and a bit more well drawn than even the Turtle sprites from just a couple of years ago. Tons of characters and references from the show were there, and it applies some new tech too. You have a lot of the big sort of Mode 7 scaling and rotation in and out of the screen, and keeps it feeling a bit new and different from what you could play at home. It has the theme tune, of course, and it just became a comforting thing to see and hear in your local arcade, even if you weren't playing it. The idle animation, the idle sort of loop video that it would play, and the music, I just liked knowing it was there. It even takes a pretty impressive stab at recreating the entire opening of the TV show in pixel form. Everyone gets a little quote here as well that sort of fits with their character. Whoa, what? Okay, that's a bit dark, but I mean, so they didn't get the tone exactly right. I also think that it's among the more forgiving games of its kind. The characters move really quickly in comparison to other beat-em-ups, which means it's easier to do hit-and-run tactics, and that's especially useful in boss fights. Yeah, obviously it eventually floods you out of your money with impossible waves of enemies, and the hit points of the final bosses are a bit of a joke, but I remember getting a decent amount of play for my 2 or 3 20-pence pieces. It's a shame some of its most creative ideas come later on when the challenge has been ramped up to frustrating levels. The Dreamland sequence is particularly good, although it really only makes sense if you're playing as Homer. Like, why would Lisa's Dreamland be full of bowling balls and donuts? Ultimately, the proof of the quality of this game lies in just how sought after it continues to be. People were thrilled to see a release on Xbox Live back in 2012, and similarly gutted when some unknown issues probably about licensing, caused it to be removed barely a year later. And it's an absolute stalwart of any retro arcade you visit nowadays. I actually played this in a real arcade as recently as last month. It's a hell of a lot better than the show has been for the last 15 years.
Kids can be so cruel.
We can? Thanks, Mom! Ow! Cut out, Bart!